पारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। The message of hope, the message of assurance that the Lord Krishna gave us is that every one of us, really speaking, is free. Our true nature is lovable and loving. Everyone is capable of expressing love, and everyone deserves all love. This is the hidden spiritual truth, and therefore the only question you and I may have is, how come we do not experience it? How come we find that we are not considered lovable at times, and at other times we are unable to love everyone? Why is some negative energy of the form of agitation or of fear or of low self-esteem, whatever, why is this there? About it, Lord Sri Krishna gave a very logical explanation. It is all because you and I have been meditating a lot. Don't think Swamiji seems to be missing or telling some wrong words today. I repeat, in a manner of saying, the cause for our bondage is that we have been meditating a lot. What? Meditation has caused all bondage? Oh, I missed two words surely. Meditating on objects. We have been meditating a lot on objects, sense pleasures. Or you want a little more philosophical description, on a certain image of our own. And Sri Krishna says, why are you after that image, however glorious or reassuring it may be? Why are you after an image when you in reality are most wonderful? We say we don't know that. Our idea or our impression is by ourselves we are useless. If we get this big house, if we get that beautiful car, or if it is not very material, if people look at me as very knowledgeable, or if somebody says how talented you are, and so on and so forth, if such and such thing happens, then we become lovable, we become worthy. So our worth is when we get something, acquire something, and decorate our image. This is how our mind goes. The Upanishads declare that no, really speaking, you are acquiring or losing, you are having a talent or not, is all a passing show. It's a game. Life is a game that you are playing. You should not take it too seriously. If you take this game too seriously, when you win, of course, you will be happy, but when you lose or when you do not win, you will have great heartburn. Put this game of life in its right place and wake up to the reality of who you are, is the message. Therefore, on one hand, Sri Krishna described dhyayato vishayan pumsaha. Today I said we have been meditating too much on objects or our own thought-created image. I didn't draw it from under my hat. It is Dhyayato, that word, the verbal root of dhyayato is dhyai. In Sanskrit, dhyai becomes dhyayati. One continuously thinks, and that very verbal root, dhyai, leads to the word dhyana. This is meditation. So there can be, broadly speaking, Bhagavad Dhyana, meditation on God, or Vishaya Dhyana, meditation on sense objects. In the Vedanta we say you can have two kinds of dhyana, Atma Dhyana or Anatma Dhyana. The mistake we did was, we have been sincere meditators, but the mistake was we did that second kind, Anatma Dhyana. Let us just change over to Atma Dhyana. Let's meditate on our true nature. This is the language of the Upanishads, the Jnana Marga. Those of us who, by our makeup, are more made for Bhakti Marga, with not much difference really, all that we need to do is meditate more on Hari, on Vasudeva, on Sri Krishna, on the Lord of love, of beauty, Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram. Fine. Some of us have an inclination towards the Advaita Vedanta. Fine. And some who are unable to appreciate it, the Shastra says, doesn't matter really, meditate on God. Therefore the great Anandamayi Ma, the born enlightened lady saint of Bengal, used to summarize all sadhana in these words, Hari Katha Hi Katha, Baki Sab Vratha Vyatha. To think about Hari, to contemplate on Lord Hari alone is worth doing it. Rest of it is all Vyatha, leads to worry, and an adjective to it, Vritha Vyatha, unnecessary worry. So, we need to think about it. What makes a great saint say this? This is all simplified summary of the teachings of Sri Krishna. And after describing how one gets enmeshed in more and more of thought-created bondage, Sri Krishna described the way out. Beginning with this moment, do not postpone. Here and now, try to perceive everything, try to see every situation without any bias, without any prejudice, without any coloring. See things as they are. Stay with facts. Then you will discover in yourself great strength. That was the great verse, Ragadvesha Viyuktaistu and so on. The reward of such a practice is prasad, great serenity. And when we have inner serenity, our mind becomes even clearer. The mind which had got clouded through personal likes and dislikes gets cleared. The popular example given in the Shastras is how a bucket of water where there is mud and therefore the water is brownish and not pure, and as though that's not enough, the water is shaking, let us say. There are waves, there are ripples. How such water would bring forth a very poor image of the sun in the sky. If the water is clear, no impurities, no shaking, then you have a bright, radiant reflection and image of the sun. As simple as that. In like manner, to the extent our mind becomes pure, we will be able to see in bhakti language the glory, the mercy, the kindness of the Lord who is never away from us. In the language of non-dual Vedanta, we will be able to see very clearly how in reality we have no problems. we can face all problems without getting much affected at all. Lord Krishna gave this great message of hope and said, when you have this prasada, which is prasannata, which is inner serenity, all sorrow comes to an end. And then he also cautioned that when we thus do not shift our attention, at least here and there, if not all through the day, here and there, let us shift the attention, think of the Lord, think of the pure consciousness, pure awareness. If we don't do it, then we are called ayukta, unconnected. We got alienated as though. Yukta means connected, ayukta means unconnected. Nasti buddhihi ayuktasya, such an ayukta, unconnected, disconnected person has no discrimination. He has no ability to hold on to the liberating truths of the scriptures, and then he doesn't have inner peace. And when there is no inner peace, of what use is all the wealth or fame or name or anything and everything? Ashantasya kutas sukham. How can he or she have happiness at all? Therefore, it is of utmost importance to reconnect with our own inner truth. A certain poet talked about the whole life of ours being like a house of 2 rooms, and he laments in that poetic imagery. You have a house of 2 rooms, but alas, we find that you are always only in the outer room, you seldom go to the inner room. Why don't you visit your inner room once in a while? Have you forgotten? You got so attached to the outer room. And what are these outer room and inner room of the house of 2 rooms representing our life? The outer room is where we are somebody. We are father, mother, boss, subordinate. We are successful or we are failure. 100 descriptions as applicable to worldly transactions are valid in the outer room. And what is the inner room? The inner room is another dimension of ours, equally valid, if not more valid, than the first one, where we are, again, let me use 2 languages. In the language of bhakti, in the inner room, there is no other description of ours except we are devotee of Lord Vasudeva, of God. I am a devotee. In the language of this Advaita Vedanta, in the inner room, I am Satchit Ananda. I am existence awareness. Is this mere imagination, or is there some truth to it? If you study, if you go along these teachings, you will find, this is such a simple truth that I missed all along. A friend of mine, a tall American who came to our Bombay ashram years ago, he was my classmate actually when I took up Vedanta studies between 1984 and 86. David MacArthur from somewhere, Washington State. He was there in our so-called batch. And he studied a little more, specifically speaking, Ramana Maharshi's Who Am I inquiry he studied. And since I was also getting into it those days, we became good friends. And one day he said to me, I can't tell you, this Who Am I inquiry is so wonderful. It can solve all our problems. And then he used an expression. This is disgustingly simple. My first exposure to American English began there. It was after another 9 years that I came here. But David MacArthur of Seattle or so said this is disgustingly simple. Why should we break our head over anything else? And interestingly, after about 5 years, again I was in Mumbai as a teacher by then. Earlier I was a student, assistant acharya. There was another David, some second name, surname, was from Australia. He too loved this who am I inquiry. Then I said to him, hey, there was a David before from America. He used to say it is disgustingly simple. But this David from Australia said, I have a different version. I said, what? This is deceptively simple. He too agreed that there is certain simplicity. But deceptively simple means you cannot take things for granted. Because you read and got excited, or because you memorized a few shlokas, and after a hot cup of coffee you recited it and felt, I'm almost there, in 2 inches behind Vivekananda now. That is not going to work. This requires a great alertness. So coming back to this metaphor of 2 rooms, we need to visit our own inner room, not neighbor's house. No need. I believe in the Bay Area, a priest came and was guiding some yajamana in a puja. Drop water, the yajamana dropped water. Hold flower, the yajamana held the flower. Drop the flower. And the priest from India, he did not know much English. He at one point said, hold nose. The yajamana held the priest's nose. Such a thing should not happen. So when I say go to the inner room, please, you don't go to another person's house and his inner room. Your own house, you are the owner, everything is yours. But alas, you have not been visiting your own inner room. Seriously, I said, is it imagination? You will find it's not so. You find it is deceptively simple, it's hard otherwise. Why? It's hard. If at all it's hard, it's because you are not at all used to visit that inner room. Your habit has been very strong. Never mind, begin today, begin at this moment, and for every 5 thoughts which rise in you, saying, I have been successful here, but over there I was a failure. This man adores me, but that man thinks I am an utter fool. This way, we again and again think about how we are perceived in this society. This is the image. We are drowning in our own images. Some of our images delight us, some other images of ours pain us, depress us. But all these images, I am this, I am that, good or bad, they constitute the outer room. Practice. Drop them all and just maybe by taking name of the Lord, or by observing your breathing, or by just staying attentive, sakshi, the witness of your thoughts, say to yourself without using words really, I am nobody. These are roles that I play. These 100 descriptions are roles that I play. At my school where I teach, I am a teacher. At my home, yes, I am a parent. Over there in that club, I am a secretary. Over here, again, I am something. But left to myself, what am I? I am none of these. I am nobody. Not in an uncomplimentary sense. It is in the sense of a certain freedom. Just stay as nobody. Stay as nothing. And this staying as nothing it can heal you. It can be a great healing process. That is the idea of turn inward. So we saw that this reconnecting to become yukta is very important. And today, Sri Krishna makes us walk further on the road of the message of hope by once more cautioning a little on this excessive indulgence in image and the affairs of the image, and also guides us towards the bliss of the inner room. Please see 67 and 68. Indriyanam hi charatam यन्मनोनुविधीयते तदस्य हरति प्रज्ञाम् वायुर्नावमिवाम्भसि इन्द्रियाणां हि चरताम् तदस्य हरति तस्माद्यस्य महाबाहो निगृहीतानि सर्वशः इन्द्रियाणीन्द्रियार्थेभ्यः तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता तस्माद्यस्य महाबाहो निगृहीतानि सर्वशः तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता. This is a restatement of the importance of training our senses. I made a reference to the spiritual teacher Ishwaran, who in fact developed an 8-point program for daily spirituality. And I may mention here that one of the 8 points for daily spirituality that he framed was or is train your senses. Train your senses. He does not say suppress your senses, deny to your senses any pleasure. No, it is not about denying pleasure. For that matter, the famous author in USA, who is now no more, Scott Peck, whose book Road Less Traveled was a popular book. He says in a study of thousands of successful people on different walks of life in the world, it was found that a certain quality was common to all these successful people. And what is that quality? He carefully words that quality. It is the ability to delay gratification and not deny. Nobody is saying go to Himalayas, live on carrot juice or only green tea or some such thing. No. Pleasures are a part of life. You may possess wealth, you may enjoy music, dance, good food, whatever is natural to you, whatever is considered, appropriate, appropriate to your age, your position, your, category, profession, and so on. Nobody says be an ascetic outwardly and inwardly. As Scott Peck puts it, what is important is do not be a slave to pleasure. As and when you want, you will just go for it without even seeing whether it is the right time or right place, etc. No ability to hold back at all. That is what we referred to the other day in the context of emotional intelligence. An important component is impulse control. If we just do what we feel like doing, that is yielding or succumbing to an impulse. We feel like enjoying something and then we say, oh, I will do it a little later. I will enjoy. But let me first finish this piece of work. Or let me first attend to this sick person. Let me get medicine for her. Let me make an inquiry how he is, how she is. And then, of course, I will enjoy whatever dharmic pleasure. Then you have indriya sanyama. This itself is rare to find. So many places people have such weakness for varieties of pleasures. Sri Krishna says, when our mind thus simply follows indriyas, the urges, the appetites, the demands of sense organs, The mind is simply following without questioning. The mind is for namesake the boss, but de facto the senses are the boss. Some places you have a namesake president or prime minister. The inside story is there is a caucus, or there is some 2-3 people who control, or there is sometimes just one person who actually controls. Then you say he is a dummy president, or she is a dummy prime minister. This person is a dummy CEO. What is this dummy? That is, really he is not the boss. Decisions are made by this other person. General public may not know. This is an analogy. Here the topic proper is our mind, here mind means buddhi also, has no control. The senses demand something and we just go by it, go by their demand. Then the analogy that Lord Krishna himself offers here is, we are then like a boat with a sail, alas, caught in wrong, unfavorable winds. Vayuhu navam ambasi. Unfavorable winds take away a boat on sail in an utterly wrong direction. That's not where we wanted to go, but these winds forcibly take us away, and maybe to our ruin also. Likewise, the indriyas take our prajna away. The whole portion is about sthita prajna, and this verse describes gata prajna, one whose understanding has gone to the winds. Prajna, the word comes here. Asya prajnam harati. What takes away? That weak mind. That weak mind, which is ruled over by the sense appetites, takes away whatever understanding we had before. We are then just for namesake scholars. Our life doesn't reflect any scholarship. Life in reality is a different story. Therefore Bernard Shaw had made that insightful statement: judge a man's character by what he does when he thinks nobody is watching. Don't judge him by how he presents himself in parties or get-togethers or in some public appearance. That all of us are very clever to put up a plastic smile and with a soft drink in hand. And of course, we are going to fight for truth. We are going to be non-violent. We are going to be 100% honest. We will make all the politically correct statements. But when we think, nobody is watching, what would we do? Bernard Shaw was very, very insightful as well as good-humored. So prajna is gone. Do we want it? We better not end up like this with no spiritual understanding, because as was pointed out before, if we do not have a certain spiritual maturity, no matter how much successful we are in other terms, we are not going to enjoy them. That success, that wealth, that apparent relationships. Why apparent? Our relationships will be only appearance, because as our spiritual maturity is less, which is no different from saying as selfishness is up and active, nobody really loves us. Because we have power or some money, because we are young and up and kicking and we are at this moment capable of delivering goods in some way, people would say to us, "Oh, we adore you, we love you, you are most important here," and everything. Once our money goes, or we get older, or we are no more able to perform, nobody cares for us, because deep inside them, they never respected us. Whereas if we are spiritually mature, if we had shown care, if we had sacrificed at times for them, if we had shown courage and so on, whether we have those external things or not, people would respect us. So prajna, that is a certain spiritual maturity, is of utmost importance. That will be gone if we are enslaved by the senses. So towards the end of today's lecture, I will be giving 5 tips on what we are supposed to do, what we are supposed to practice. 5 days we heard your lectures. It was nice. We understood, we laughed, we appreciated. But finally tomorrow morning we are back to the routine. Are there some practices? So I will attempt answering them, and in advance I am telling, one of those 5 tips for spiritual practice is train your senses. I am not asking you to deny yourself any pleasure, but have the ability to delay. Have the ability to put it in its proper place. I am going to call it the instruction of moderation. Moderation is another word for the same outlook, where you do not cross the line, you do not, you eat delicious food, you do not overeat. You take in right measure at the right time with a certain sense of what is appropriate, not disappearing. And the 68th verse is a summary, tasmat. Tasmat means therefore. Therefore, O Arjuna, hope you are able to see clearly. It's not just bookish scholarship. Bookish scholarship doesn't mean much at all when it is the context of freedom. Yasya indriyani nigrahitani. The test of the pudding is in its eating, goes the old saying. The litmus test of whether somebody is spiritually mature, Sri Krishna is saying without mincing words, is whether she or he has the necessary control over the behavior of his or her senses. Nigrahitani sarvashah indriyani indriyarthebhyah tasya prajna pratishtita. So this is a summary statement of the importance of self-control, and we have said enough. It is not brutal self-control or some kind of suppression or some kind of merely willpower guided affair. This is a mature relationship, a mature training you have imparted to your senses, whereby without conflict or without struggle, without any bitterness inside you, you are able to at times say no, at times stop. There is no bitterness. If it were an immature affair, then on one hand you say no, I don't want. Inside is, oh my God, why did I take that decision? Why did I resolve? I should not. Or even if I had resolved, the mistake I made was I announced it in front of all. This is creating more mess than ever before. So we are not talking of that kind of immature control. So the place of training the senses. Now, in a poetic, inspiration, Lord Sri Krishna says, you don't know where you can reach. You don't know the bliss that you will enjoy, the freedom that you experience when you make these adjustments, when you have sense control and when you let go of the selfish tendencies. First thing you lose a lot. Actually you gain so much, and in a very poetic language he says, the whole world changes for you. Let's see how he puts it in 69. Ya nisha sarva bhutanam tasyam jagarti sanyami yasyam jagrati bhutani sa nisha pashyato munehe ya nisha sarva bhutanam tasyam jagarti sanyami sa nisha pashyato mune. This is mystical poetry. If taken literally, It means whatever is nisha, night, to all living beings, to everybody, that is when the illumined person keeps awake. And when all are awake, for him it is night. You may say he goes to sleep. Somebody said, is this a description of a night watchman? And a friend of mine, Swamiji, who is very humorous, no, this is a description of the owl. उल्लू की बात हो रही है इधर. उल्लू की बात नहीं. It's not the talk of the owl, nor is it the talk of the night watchman. All that is fine for some humor. A little sprinkling of humor is welcome. More of it is undesirable. Seriously, this is the illumined person being described, and what it means is what attracts the ignorant people. The ignorant people, without realizing that it is their own thinking process that has given value to some outer object, imagining that the outer object has an intrinsic worth, they rush towards power, position, wealth. They rush towards name, fame. They rush towards some decoration of their image. They'll say to somebody, if you see that my picture comes in the newspaper in the front page, I'll be ready to give you so much. Please see that my name comes first and that fellow's name comes later, and so on and so forth. Hardly any of us is totally free from it. We have that dimension in us where we value our image and then our pleasure, sense pleasures, our positions. Some people are so status conscious. And in old orthodox societies, caste and community and where are you from, to which family do you belong, etc. was a very big question. Gurcharan Das, who held a senior position in Procter and Gamble, and later, much before he retired normally, he gave up to become a good author. And recently he came out with a wonderful book on Mahabharata, and the title of the book is The Difficulty of Being Good. Very interesting title. The Difficulty of Being Good is a wonderful book by Gurcharan Das. In that, every chapter is devoted to one or some or other character of Mahabharata. I was glancing at the chapter on Karna the other day, and that chapter also is titled nicely, Karna, the problem of status consciousness. I was intrigued. We know Karna as a great giver. Maybe the title should have been Karna, the great giver, Dana Shura Karna. But it says, Mr. Das declares or calls it status consciousness. So I started reading, skipping four or five earlier chapters. I jumped to Karna. And there he shows, drawing original shlokas from Mahabharata, the Sanskrit of which he puts in the appendix, making it easier for Western readers or Westernized Indians and whatnot. He says, even as Karna, in his first appearance amidst Pandavas or in front of Pandavas and Kauravas, challenges Arjuna. Karna says, Arjuna, today you impressed everybody with many wonderful acts of bravery, acts of archery. With your bow and arrow, you showed extraordinary skills. Let me tell you, I will now show better skills in every one of those categories. That's what he explicitly says. There is some shloka to that effect. And everybody is stunned. He just walked in. They don't know who he is. They don't know his name. They don't know his family. But everyone was impressed. Everyone, Drona, Krupa, and all those elders, younger people, all of them look at this young man walking in, and his lakshanas, certain characteristics, certain marks, and the way he conducted himself, all that indicated that this is not joke. But then one of them, perhaps Dronacharya asks him, we have some rules that our princes, Arjuna or Duryodhana or any of us, we are from the royal dynasty. And we do not even accept challenges from anybody without checking on their credentials. So first tell us whose son you are. And in Mahabharata it is said that as soon as he is asked that question, whose son are you? Karna's face fades. He feels so embarrassed because social realities, this society, which is supposed to have a lot of norms, from time immemorial and even to this day, the society has two faces. It has certain norms which are supposed to be good for everybody, and then certain values which in fact persecute a number of people. A number of people suffer at the hands of the values of Eastern or Western or any society. So without getting distracted, Karna becomes very nervous. And then of course Duryodhana comes forward and instantly he says, I appoint him as the king of Anga Rajya, a certain kingdom. No matter whose son he is, no matter from where he has come, this moment I give him the kingdom of Anga, and now he is a king, and now he can fight or he can contend, he can rival, he can compete with Arjuna. And then Drona, Kripa, all of them agree. All right, if he is a king, he qualifies. But by then it appears the sun was almost setting, and therefore the show did not take place. Status consciousness. So we say power, status have always been important for this mad society which you and I have created. We have only subscribed. We are the stockholders. We are the shareholders of all the value systems of this society. Whenever these values were convenient to us, we said yes. But when to ourselves or to some near and dear one among us, the systems are so unfavorable, we say this is very unjust, this is very unfair. We should not look down at her or look down at him just because she or he does such and such thing, and so on. We cry foul at that time. We only had supported the society. Anyway, what is this Nisha and what is this Jagarti? What is this night and what is this day? As I said, a number of things because of psychological value systems, not factual value system, like whose son he is, that has become a value in that particular society. Color of skin, color of eyes, so on and so forth. Gender, so many. Even today the world is not free of a bias against women. You, woman, how can you say this? Why that woman? Right? That is called the vision of the ignorant. The unillumined people attach values to all these things, whereas the illumined people, illumined person, looks at it as immaterial. Therefore, when everybody threw stones at that woman woman who had been alleged of some misconduct, Jesus Christ comes in the Christian stories and he is aghast, seeing that people are throwing stones at this woman. And then he says, hold on, my friends, wait, don't throw. All of them stop. And then he says, now, anyone here who has not sinned, who has not committed sin, may first throw the stone. Everyone stops. No one throws. And quietly they go away. Why didn't Jesus Christ also take a stone? Tamasha chal raha hai, let me join the tamasha. No. What was a heinous crime for all of them was a matter which needed further inquiry, further thought for the saint that Christ was. So he stops. He is able to look at that woman who was branded as sinful by the society. He was able to look at her with eyes of compassion. So all this have to be gone into very carefully. This doesn't mean that anybody may do anything, someone kills, someone does something else, and you say, look at him with eyes of compassion, please. That is not the idea. You need to examine, are you in the grip of a certain habitual, mechanical value system, or are you really concerned about the well-being of the society? So this Ya Nisha Sarva Bhutanam is a very powerful statement expressed in a poetic language. What is of value to ordinary people has no value to the enlightened. And the second part, and where he is excited, people go to sleep. It is said Guru Nanak Dev, for some time before he was well known, was working in a grocery shop, and when someone came to buy some rice, he was doing his job. 1, 2, and in Punjabi, ek, do, etc. He went, and 12, and when he said tera, he measured. The 13th measure with a certain measuring vessel. He said tera, and the customer was waiting. Maybe the customer wanted 15 seer or 15 measures. But Guru Nanak Dev, as the word tera came out from his mouth, went into raptures. As you know, tera in Hindi, Punjabi means everything is yours, O Lord. Everything is yours. So a powerful insight, a powerful inspiration caught hold of Nanak Dev, and he just fell down unconscious. He went into samadhi or something. Customer was surprised, what happened? So, for everybody, it is rice, it is wheat. We are doing business, let us buy something. And, Guru Nanak Dev saw something else. Where Guru Nanak was excited, for others it didn't mean anything. So, as simple as this, our value system undergoes a dramatic change. Now it need not be, lastly, it need not be a contrast between others and ourselves. It is a contrast between our own ignorant condition and our own awakened condition. What we would have valued a lot in ignorance would not mean much to us at all, would hardly mean anything to us when we awaken. And when we awaken, whatever is valuable was not important at all in those days. In our days of ignorance, we might have not cared for spirituality, universal love, such things. But in the awakened state, those things come to us naturally, and we would not care anymore for some kind of personal praise or personal glorification. So two sets of values, the spiritual and the material. The awakening shifts you from one to the other. How is it to happen? Any one of us can walk towards that, as we said before, by spending more time in the inner room. In metaphoric language, your life has 2 rooms, and you have all the time been in the outer room. Please, for heaven's sake, spend some time in the inner room of your life, where you are nobody except a devotee of the Lord. So that is the contrast. And as there is this awakening, will desires not rise at all? Sri Krishna says, desires may rise, either because of old habit or because somebody brings it up. A certain desire may rise. When you come close to a certain attractive object, a certain desire may rise in the mind, but then, as the idiom goes, it is a drop in the bucket. You have by then discovered something in yourself, a desire that rises also will have no consequence, will hardly disturb you. This is the meaning he covers in yet another wonderful metaphor. Apuryamana machala pratishtam samudramapah pravishanti yadvat tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve sashanti mapnoti na kama kami. Apuryamana machala pratishtam samudramapah pravishanti yadvat tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve sashanti mapnoti na kama kami. Vihaya kaman yas sarvan pumanscharati nispraha nirmamo nirahankaraha sashanti madhigacchati. Vihaya kaman yas sarvan pumanscharati nispraha nirmamo nirahankaraha sashanti madhigacchati. Both the verses have the word Shanti. All of us want Shanti. Who does not want peace? We imagine that peace should be available, peace would be available by my becoming this, by my becoming that, my acquiring this. And things of the world are not a total disappointment. They do give us some peace for a while. Even when we buy something new, even a little gadget we buy, it's interesting, attractive, new features, Mahashanti for a while. Very happy. We are all 2 inches above the ground. Right. So, Krishna or Gita is talking about something different. The undisturbed, unshakable peace. Both these verses talk about that Parashanti. Not temporary peace, not temporary suspension of sorrow or agitation. The metaphor in 70 is how an ocean maintains its level. So we have the expression sea level. That becomes a reference. People ask me these days, are you on top of some mountains? In some cave, I believe. So I clarify, no, I am not in any cave, I am not on top of any mountain, I am in a nice little town. Oh, that means on ground level only, at the foot of the hill. No, I am not at the foot of the hill also. I am at Solan, which is 5,000 feet above sea level. Oh, samajh gaye, people say. Sea level is a reference. Now, as we see in this verse, Sri Krishna talks about apaha. Second line has samudram apaha pravishanti. Apaha in Sanskrit at places means water, but here apaha means rivers. Number of rivers during certain tide, up tide and low tide we talk of, depending on the moon's position as regards the earth. There is a physics about it. So, huge amounts of water rivers bring to the ocean. At some other time, huge amount of water leaves the ocean and gets into the river. In the river, it is up tide and low tide. Therefore, no one says, I am 5,000 feet above the river level. The river level is not a reference. River level is not a standard. But sea level is a standard, in a manner of saying, as popular language goes. So, using the popular usage, Lord Krishna says, just as the ocean maintains its level Even as waters come in and water goes out, rivers bring or take away water. Likewise, don't think that an enlightened person has no desires rising, but desires become so manageable, so insignificant in the process. They do not have much consequence. Therefore, the English idiom once more, the drop in the bucket. Suppose you have a handful of salt, mix it in 100 ml of water, try to drink, it's very hard to drink that salt water. Same handful of salt, mix it in 20 liters of water, let it dissolve. You can drink the water. It's not so distasteful. So this awakening brings to any of us a sense of such well-being, such wonderful well-being. Then this mind of ours, this old mind, once in a while suppose has desires, has some anger, has some displeasure, has some pain. I had said in the first day also, enlightened one also may have some pain. Not that there is no up or down of the mind. But the enlightened man is much more than the mind. He is primarily rooted or anchored in awareness. Awareness is such an expanse where the mind is a finite, limited affair. And the awakened one is able to see how limited the mind is. Therefore, one can take it all in one's stride. Samudramapaha pravishanti, and by implication, they don't disturb the level of the sea. Tadvat kamaha pravishanti. Desires may enter, but they just disappear. On a hot plate, if you put a drop of oil, it just burns away. It won't stay there long. So, one more analogy I gave. It is as though you are able to have those thoughts, but then the thoughts disappear without disturbing you. They come and go. For an instant they may somewhat seem to disturb you, but you quickly recover. I have read in a certain book an account of Dalai Lama in Dharamshala was giving a discourse, and somebody brought a piece of paper and handed over to the Dalai Lama. He just read it and broke down and cried for half a minute or 1 minute. He cried like a child would cry. People were shocked. 1,000 people listening to his mid-morning discourse. But he gathered himself, and another 20 minutes he spoke and completed his discourse. And then he knew that people would be all wondering. Half of the people would not have heard that last 20 minutes. Their mind is wondering what made him cry. Whatever. At the end of it, he clarified. You must be wondering why I broke down. That messenger brought a piece of paper, a piece of news, that last night China massacred some 100 Tibetans in Lhasa, our people, and the death and the heinous way in which they died caused so much grief in me. So I lost my balance for a while. But he regained it. So let us not over-standardize how an enlightened soul actually behaves. It varies from person to person. Makeup. If you have an emotional makeup, pretty much you will have an emotional makeup even in enlightenment, but there would be a different flavor, different shine, a different way that you will go about it. You will also feel, others also will feel. But emotions per se may not disappear, do not have to disappear. In fact, suppose somebody among you is a highly emotional person, and with sadhana, with spiritual practice, you become illumined. Quite likely, you will continue to be emotional, not in a selfish way. You will be very, very strong about protecting somebody and ensuring that people are taken care of. You will be passionate, that's the word. You will be passionate. Not for your own selfish gains, but for people. Or maybe you will work for a cause and you will be very passionate. Somebody tries to disturb, or some politicians come and block you, he is a senator maybe or a minister something, but you are nobody apparently, but you will be able to say to him, you better get off. Either you help or you get off. Don't block this work. Now somebody may say, I think she is not spiritually illumined. This kind of strong reactions don't speak of Sthita Prajna. Who are you to decide how a Sthita Prajna should behave? That anger, that passion, that screaming at the person who was obstructing some good work is not against the Sthita Prajna description. Because you didn't yell or scream for your own little personal advantage. You are trying to maybe help some orphans or some abused women or something, some good cause. And here is this person trying to throw a spanner in the works. And you scream. Now that screaming goes well with the illumination, no problem. Because what doesn't go well with illumination, with enlightenment, is narrow selfishness. That doesn't go well with spirituality. That is the idea. Here and there certain emotions may arise, but they rise and they go away. Next moment you are free of them. You are not in their grip. Then you have peace. However, when we say desires may arise, it is not an endorsement or, okay, no problem, continue to have any desire whatsoever. No. Once more it is said, Vihaya Kaman. Whoever is able to let go of his desires, of course selfish desires are meant, narrow desires, desires conceived in a narrow perception of things, such a person attains peace. Nirmamaha nirahankaraha. Then these ideas of I, me and my. Ahankara is I and mama is my. I and my. I, me and my. I, me, my and mine. All this. These disappear. One becomes nispraha. One may enjoy at times, but one doesn't long for its continuation. One does not, harbor thoughts like, I enjoyed this place, that food, that reception, or the way people treated me over there. That is where I want to go more and more now. That doesn't come in the consciousness of the illumined one. If he visits some place, if she comes again to some place where she was well received, that would be on other factors. Maybe she loves, this enlightened lady has certain love for some village, some town, some people, not the honor or the hospitality or some pleasures and so on. Therefore, spruha is wanting continuation of those personal gratifications, nispruha. There is no such thing in such a person. And last but not the least, in the concluding verse, Lord Krishna says, this is not a matter of, how long should I keep this state? How long should I practice it? Yesterday I touched upon it. We sometimes have a hang-up of length of time. You may remember, yesterday I said, some people say, how do I stay aware for 1 hour at a stretch? How do I stay attentive for the whole day? This very thought is not in place. Don't worry about that 1 hour or one whole day. Can you be aware? Can you observe your own thought flow, your own emotions for a minute or two? It is the intensity, it is the total seeing. You see totally. Even for a split second, it can make a big difference. Your consciousness undergoes a transformation. Sri Krishna brings it out powerfully in this verse, which looks a simple verse, but actually it also has tremendous significance. I would briefly say that this verse blasts psychological time. Psychological time is really dismissed as having any place in transformation of consciousness. Chronological time is the clock time. And we are talking of psychological time, where through our thinking we say, I'm enjoying now, I'm very peaceful, but will I be peaceful tomorrow? And some people, I'm attending a lot of satsangs, but my worry is, will I get enlightened in this life or will I have to be born again? So this concern through time, through thought. Thought creates an axis of time and then puts an image of oneself. 2014, I'm pretty good. How will I be in 2015? How will I be in 2016? This 14, 15, 16 is thought-created axis, right? It's like the train may be going on two rails, and I see it, and then I think, next time I want to go in by that train. It's a wonderful train. It's a, what you call, a palace on wheels or something. And then I start visualizing. And then I start visualizing with whom? With such and such friends. And with such and such whatever. I visualize. I see a train in my mind. This is psychological. That was the real physical train which went. So there is something called psychological time, which is an essential component of bondage. And this verse blasts that psychological time. Please see how Sri Krishna puts it. Esha brahmi sthiti partha Nainam prapya vimuhyati Stitva syam antakalepi Brahma nirvanam ricchati Esha brahmi sthiti partha Nainam prapya vimuhyati Stitva syamantakalepi Brahma nirvanam ricchati. O Partha, O Arjuna, O son of Pratha, Kunti's name was Pratha. This which I have described is the Brahmic state, Brahmi sthitihi. This state which I compared with an ocean where rivers bring and take water, or I compared it with someone for whom when it is day, for everybody else it is night. So using several metaphors and otherwise, I showed you a state of freedom. This is it. This is the Brahmi sthiti, staying firm in Brahma, Brahman. And enam prapya na vimuhyati. This is nainam. It is made of two words, na, enam. Enam means this. Enam prapya. Having got this state, na vimuhyati. Take na out and connect it with vimuhyati. Once you experience this, once you see this, once you get this understanding, forever you are free. So, I said therefore that it's not the length of time, it is seeing clearly, even once. And he further endorses, further reinforces that idea, antakalepi. Somebody is about to die, maybe at the age of 100, maybe 90, 80, 70, 60, 40, 50, whatever. In last 2 minutes of his life, 2 minutes later, he breathed his last. She kicked the bucket, as the idiom goes. But in that last 2 minutes, she or he is able to see clearly, I am not this personality. I was Brahma, I am Brahman, I will be Brahman, Advaita language. Or, I belong to Krishna, I am with Krishna, I am always with Krishna. This body dying doesn't mean anything to me. I am not attached to. If I have to go, I go. I don't go anywhere, I am with my Lord. Not just words, it's an insight, liberating insight. If this liberating insight happens even for a split second, and that too, just before one's death, Sri Krishna says, Brahma nirvanam ricchati. That person is liberated. So this is a great praise of seeing rightly. You see rightly, for a little while, it transforms your consciousness. The consciousness which was tethered before, which was tied down to images, to pleasure, to power, to some aspiration, to some seeking, It was tethered, it was tied. Now it is untethered. It is unleashed. It is set free. This is the beauty. Now, just to mention a couple of tips. One is, see in the verses we covered how much Sri Krishna talked about the state of bondage necessarily being marked by unbridled behavior of the senses. The senses go amok. The senses then do not have discipline. Whereas he didn't use the word of should or should not. He said, if you are in that illumined consciousness, your senses would not behave in an irresponsible manner. Things would be in the right place. A place for everything, everything in its place. And therefore, to train, I would use the language of Ishwaran, to train our senses. Or secondly, to be moderate in all our indulgences. Neither too much nor too less, neither suppression nor going berserk. Moderation, that is one spiritual practice. And second one, you know how Sri Krishna, and in my lectures I highlighted it, gave tremendous importance to awareness. In fact, one of the meanings of the word prajna, which is same as prajnana, is awareness. This is of course a high teaching. Self-awareness is at the top of the ladder, top of the whole list. Therefore, please remember always, you got to be watchful. Understand how senses are operating. Understand your hurt, your pride, your elation. Next time somebody doesn't smile at you and you get a little annoyed. How come? Yeah, he saw but he turned his face as though he did not see me. I am upset. Maybe he did a mistake. But try to understand why you are so upset about it. What is it that upset you so much, and what is that conditioning? First of all, why do you give so much importance to him? If he smiled, why would it be so important? And if he did not smile, why would it be such a... Try to understand. This is through self-awareness, not analysis, just by noticing, by watching. So, number one, be moderate in all the affairs of senses, indriyas. Number two, on the other end, on the high level, be self-aware wherever possible, whenever possible. Don't worry about the length of time. I already clarified. Even for 2 minutes, watch out what is happening in you. Between these two, I put three other, and those three are, I would summarize them using an acronym. I have been using it for 2 decades, and I have personally benefited a lot from it. People have said they benefited a lot from this 3-point formula, sort of. That is called EMS. In India, if you go ask somebody what is EMS, they will say Express Mail Service. The Indian Postal Service has one EMS, it goes fast. Express Mail Service, fast. But I am not a postman or a post officer. EMS stands for, we are made of 3 aspects: body, mind and intellect. These verses fully support or almost prescribe the right tuning, right maintenance, right handling of our body, of our mind, of our intellect. For these Sharira, Mana, Buddhi, EMS is a prescription, exercise for the body. E means exercise. Meditation for the mind, the emotional mind. And study, scriptural study. Don't say I read Wall Street Journal every day. Not that study. Study of spiritual literature. EMS, exercise, meditation and study for body, mind and intellect, Sharira, Mana, Buddhi. These 3 are a wonderful program for continuous spiritual self-improvement. And do these 18 verses talk about it? Of course. When you practice self-control, when you try to practice emotional control, you find many times you don't have the ability. You can easily see those days on which you perform some yoga, some pranayama, exercise. You find there is a certain greater flexibility, greater agility, a greater, you feel you are in control of things. When you have not done any workout for a number of days, there is a general lethargy, a general, you are more likely to compromise on what you regard as right. You have no control on yourself. Meditation, where have the verses talked about how thoughts bind us, how emotions can hijack us? It is through meditation, which could be of many kinds, on a mantra, on breath observation. It could be, there are many forms of meditation. Whatever appeals to you, take it up. And yes, for study, again, lot of choices. In prose or poetry, in Sanskrit, English or any language, read something periodically. Moment you realize, last 15 days I have not touched any spiritual reading. Suspend everything and half an hour read something. Break that long, gap. 15, don't say, one of these days I am going to sit with Gita again. That becomes none of these days. So, EMS, exercise, meditation and study, and moderation in sense pleasure, and last but most important, self-awareness. These could be practical tips on our journey towards Sthita Prajna. For 5 evenings, all of you have heard with rapt attention, encouraging the speaker to freely and happily express his views. Thank you, and God bless every one of you on the journey of spiritual practices.